In the last video we talked about adding and subtracting sign fractions, so this one we're going to do multiplying and dividing. Now the steps for multiplying and dividing are just a little bit different, so I only have the multiplying ones up first. So what I want to point out is before you start multiplying or dividing, if you would like, you can determine the sign first, and then you don't have to worry about the positives and negatives as you move through it. So that would be my recommendation, is figure out the sign first. That way you're not messing around and dropping negatives as you're going through all your computations. Okay? So like adding and subtracting, I'm going to change any mix to improper. Then we're going to make sure we do what we call cross-reducing, and if you've forgotten, I'll show you what it looks like in just a minute. Then after you've cross-reduced, we're going to multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and as long as you did your cross-reducing right, your fraction should already be in lowest terms, but it's always good to double check. And then you want to change any mixed numbers or any improper fractions into mixed numbers. Okay, so let's do a couple examples here. So starting off, we've got 14 over 15 times 20 over 21. So 14 over 15 is in lowest terms, and 20 over 21 is in lowest terms. But what that multiplication sign is pointing at is it's letting us know, and my apologies here, I need to have this in. Otherwise, there's no point in doing this example. What I have here, though, is my numbers that are across from one another are not in lowest terms. Okay, so because we're allowed to multiply and divide in any order, this would be the same as if I moved the 20 on top of the 15 and moved the negative 14 on top of the 21. It still would give me the same thing because multiplication is commutative, which means I can go in whatever order I want. And so if I was to move them, now I can put 20 over 15 into lowest terms, right? I can make that turn into 4 over 3. Okay, so that's really what the cross-reducing part is it's saying, are the numbers across from each other, do they have any common factors that we can remove before multiplying? Okay. All right, before I do my cross-reducing, I am just going to double check. I have one negative sign. Okay, so I have one negative sign, and that means that my answer is going to be negative. If I have an odd number of negatives, I get a negative answer. If there's an even number of negatives, I get a positive answer. So before I even do any work, I know that my answer is going to be negative. Okay? All right, so no mixed numbers here, so I'm just going to get rid of my common factors. So 15 and 20 have a common factor of 5. So the 20 divided by 5 becomes a 4. 15 divided by 5 would become a 3. Okay? The 14 and the 21, they have a common factor of 7. Now when I cross out the 14 and I write the 7, I do still have that negative sign there, so it is a negative 7. Now, I don't really need to worry about it. Oh, my apologies. It's got to be a 2. Goodness gracious. 14 divided by 7 is 2, not 7. They have a common factor of 7. So I do need to still write that negative there, but since I already figured out that my sign in the end is going to be negative, if at this point I forget to write it, it won't make my answer wrong so long as I remember this part. Okay? If you forget to write the negative and you didn't figure out the sign first, then you definitely will get your answer wrong. Okay, 21 divided by 7 would become a 3. So now we have everything in lowest terms, and you don't need to rewrite it, but I will just for the purpose of our example, so we can see what's happening. Okay, so I've changed my fraction, so instead of being negative 14 over 15 times 20 over 21, I've reduced everything and changed it to negative 2 over 3 times 4 over 3. And that's going to give me negative 2 times 4 is 8, 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, so negative 8 over 9, already in lowest terms because I removed all of my common factors before multiplying. And as well, it's a proper fraction, so I don't need to change anything to mixed. Okay, all right, let's look at example number 2. So example number 2, and let's see if I can have no errors in this one. That would be nice. So I've got 1, 2, 3 negative signs. Okay, since there are 3 negatives and 3 is odd, that means that my answer is going to be, oh, Remember I said no errors? My answer is going to be negative. Okay? All right. So I'm going to change everything from mixed to improper. So 1 times 9 is 9, plus 7 gives me 16 over 9, and that negative is still technically there. And then times, and I got my negative 15 over negative 32. So there still are 3 negatives, so I'm still going to get that negative answer. Okay. All right, let's find our common factors. So 16 and 32 have a common factor of 16. So that would change into a negative 2 and a negative 1. And then 9 and 15 have common factors of 3, so that one would become a negative 5. And this one here would be a positive 3. So negative 1 times 5 gives me positive 5. And 3 times negative 2 gives me negative 6. And I already knew that I was going to have one negative left over. I'm going to move that negative back up to the numerator. If I leave it in the denominator, it's going to stay hidden. So I want to always bring my negatives up to the numerator. Okay. Now if you didn't want to worry about all those negative signs throughout our whole multiplication process, we already took care of that here. I knew my answer needed to be negative, so I can just throw it in at the end. Okay. Alright, so for dividing. So you might remember dividing, we still start off doing the same thing. I'm going to pick out what my sign is going to be. I'm going to change mixed to improper. But remember, we didn't actually do any dividing. We said don't divide. We want to multiply by the reciprocal instead. So the reciprocal, remember, that is where the numerator and the denominator switch spots. It's basically like your fraction does a handstand and they switch places. Okay? After you've changed it to multiplying, we're going to cross reduce. We're going to multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and then double check it's in lowest terms and change anything improper to mixed. Okay, I got a couple of examples here. Alright, so first off, I'm going to check for my sign. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 negative signs, right? So 4 negatives means that we are going to have a positive answer. Okay, so I'm not going to bother writing my negative signs in here. I'm just going to leave it because I know what it's going to be at the end. Okay, alright, so I'm looking for, I got to get rid of my division. So I still keep that first fraction the same, 18 over 35, but instead of dividing, I want to switch to multiplying, and then I have to take the reciprocal of that second fraction. So the second fraction flips upside down. Okay? Alright, let's look for our common factors. So 18 and 21 have a common factor of 3. 18 divided by 3 is 6. 21 divided by 3 is 7. And 35 and 25 have a common factor of 5. 35 divided by 5 is 7. 25 divided by 5 is 5. And when we multiply these together, 6 times 5 is 30. And 7 times 7 is 49. And again, I know my answer is positive, so I just bring that positive sign in there. If it is positive, feel free to just leave it blank. We assume every number is positive until we say it is negative. Okay? Alright, one more. This one's got a combination here, so it's a little bit more difficult. Okay, so let's look through. First off, let's determine the sign. 1, 2, 3, 3 negative signs. Okay, so 3 negatives, 3's odd, so our answer is going to be negative in the end. Okay? Alright, now I got a bunch of mixed numbers here, so I got to change everything from mixed to improper. So for the first one, 1 times 2 is 2 plus the 1 up top, so I get 3 over 2, divided by 2 times 3 is 6 plus the 2 up top is 8 over 3, times 3 times 4 is 12 plus 3, so we get 15 over 4. And then divided by 4 times 5 gives me 20 plus the 4 up top is 24 over 5. Okay? Alright, now I don't want to do this division, so I have a few divisions in here and I don't want to do those divisions. Okay? I'm going to get rid of this division and I'm going to get rid of this division, and we say multiply by the reciprocal, so don't divide, multiply by the reciprocal. So the ones that I didn't put in a box, those guys are fine. I'm not worried about the 3 halves or the 15 quarters. But what I want to get rid of is these division signs, and then I have to take the reciprocal of the neighboring fraction, okay, to the right. Oops. So this one here is going to become 5 over 24. Okay, let's see what we can do for cross-reducing. So remember, when you're doing your cross-reducing, you can go, you really can go anything in a numerator by anything in another denominator. And with this one, I think the only thing that I see, this 3 and the 24. 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 24 divided by 3 gives me 8. I think that's all I've got. Okay. Alright, so let's look at the numerators now. 3 times 1 is 3, times 15 is 45, times 5 gives me 225. Another way of doing that was the 3 times the 5 is 15, and then times another 15 is 15 squared. Okay. On the denominator, we've got 2 times 8, which is 16, times 4, which is 64, times 8, which is, what's that? 512, I think. Okay. Or we could have just gone 2 times 4 is 8, and then times 8 times 8, so it's 8 cubed, giving us 512. Now, the last thing we have to do, we said very early on that our answer needed to be negative, so I better make sure I bring that negative sign in. So overall, my answer is negative 225 over 512. Alright, that's multiplying and dividing signed fractions. Pretty much the exact same processes you would have learned in grade 8. The only thing that's different this year is you have to figure out whether your answer is positive or negative. Alright, have a good week.